Good day and welcome to Leading with Transparency, our last and final lesson, Lesson 4. It's really been a treat spending all these lessons with you, lessons 1 through 3. And Lessons 4 is really a recap and a closure of Leading with Transparency, as well as how to scale this and make it system-wide. The class today is Leading with Transparency, Systems Thinking and Effective Communication. And it's based on Weaver's literature, promoting a culture of safety as a patient safety strategy, a systematic review. This lesson introduces systems thinking as a lens to understand safety failures and communication breakdowns. It demonstrates how transparent data sharing fosters learning and team-based problem solving, reviews tools like incident reporting system and dashboards during learning huddles. It also talks and spends a lot of time understanding how do we scale? How do we take this concept of safe, transparent care, speaking up, leading with transparency, listening and valuing the front lines? How do we take all of that, make it a success in maybe our own unit, our own department, and then scale that to a whole health system, scale it to more operating units, scale it to other parts of the business. So we'll go through that and we'll explore that here momentarily. So transparency, system thinking, and effective communications are core to patient safety. We've been hearing about that all throughout our lessons. Without transparency, without safety culture, without systems thinking and communicating eye to eye at every level, both at the top, at the bottom, and at every level is key and is the main part around safety and reducing of risk in our patient safety strategy. You read in Weaver et al. 2013, so the section that you had to read for lesson 4, and in fact for some of the other lessons that you've endeavored on during this class, we discussed systemic reviews of strategies to promote a culture safety, with a focus on linking systems approaches with open communication practices. So we've discussed all of that. We've discussed understanding systems thinking and its relevance to patient safety. We've explored the connection between communication and safety culture. And we're going to do a little bit more of that here in the next section. Healthcare is really complex. And why system thinking matters is because we don't just work in a small unit. We work in a microcosm of health. All of it is linked, intertwined, and linked together. If you come to a hospital, you walk in through the emergency room, your experience there, both as it relates to safety and risk and outcomes, then translates to home care or translates to an inpatient setting, an inpatient care. So that emergency room visit then builds on the inpatient visit that provides more care all throughout, that then links you maybe to a surgery, maybe to an appointment outside of the hospital, maybe to at-home care. So it's all interconnected. Errors often arise from system failures, not individuals. We're going to learn later on in an interview that we're going to have with Michelandi Ridori, who is over the highly reliable and risk part of our organization. We're going to learn and discuss more about how a lot of times or oftentimes the theme has been when we hear about risk issues or items that oftentimes there is a system that may be broken or a policy that may need to be revamped or a medication that may be missing or a supply that may be in need. Errors often arise from system failures and not necessarily that individual. The individual may be escalating something that they needed and did not have, and that's why we were able to solve the item. Systems thinking shifts perspective from blame to learning. You heard earlier that many times, I think in the beginning of my career, when I had to share opportunities or items that I may have identified that needed to be resolved, I thought I was alone. I thought maybe I was the only person in the room that had identified that issue or that had that issue, right? I can remember during the flu vaccine, I thought we were the only hospital without flu vaccines. Come to find out that most hospitals across the country didn't have them. or when we identified issues around patient safety as it relates to identifying the patient, maybe labeling the patient's name, I thought maybe it just was my hospital that couldn't figure it out, when in fact there was other hospitals as well. So lots of times there's psychological safety in knowing that not only my organization or my hospital or I have an issue, but also other people or other organizations or other departments have the same issue. Systems thinking shifts perspective from blame to learning, because as opposed to saying, hey, this is my issue and my issue alone, it may be all of our issue. And it's great to know it's all of our issue because we can all get in the room to solve the issue. Knowing that it's all of our issue is more valuable in creating an environment where people feel safe to be part of the solution rather than fighting that solution or saying, it's not me, it's only you. Transparency allows identification of latent conditions and vulnerabilities. We've learned through all the lessons I think you've heard and learned at this point and may feel and understand that it's only with transparency and allowing a speak up culture that we're able to identify conditions and vulnerabilities and risks in our provision of care. Again, whether it's a policy, a procedure, equipment, supplies, medication that may be an issue, those items are clearly contributing to an opportunity for safer care. And so it's up to us to fix those issues. But again, the only way we identify those issues is by allowing folks to what? To speak up. And then, of course, why systems thinking matters is effective leaders look at interactions across system, not isolated events. Putting on my system leadership, I don't just care. I mean, yes, I care that something happened in one division or one unit, but a highly reliable organization cares that we're able to solve that problem for the whole organization. We don't just care about that one patient. We care about that one patient and all those patients that came before or after. So if we're able to solve an issue where there's no gloves or the wrong needle or the wrong medication, it's not just about that interaction, it's about all interactions. So it's important that we identify issues that we can resolve system-wide rather than just in an isolated bubble. So as you learn of opportunities, socialize those opportunities in groups, in your weekly huddles, in your morning huddles, with your leadership team. Bring up and encourage and make it safe, again, psychologically safe, for our leaders, for our front lines to bring up opportunities. Because I guarantee you that if you're thinking that something is only happening in your department or your division, it's happening in other places. Humans are humans, and we're all the same. And we all make the same mistakes, and we all learn from those mistakes. So it's better to talk about them and learn about them together, so we identify resolutions together, rather than doing it piecemeal or piece by piece. Key insights from our literature that I want to harp on or touch back up on. So our literature in Weaver was extremely important. They talked deeply about strong safety culture associated with improved outcomes. They spoke clearly about the need to ensure that your caregivers understand that the culture around safety and speaking up is highly valued because it improves outcomes. It makes our delivery of care better for all of our patients, thereby having results, better results for our organization, thereby yielding better volume or financial returns, right? Everybody expects healthcare to be at a minimum safe and have great outcomes. That is only possible by ensuring that our individuals feel comfortable to speak up and knowing that it's psychologically safe to be involved in opportunities for our organization. Our literature also speaks deeply and heavily on leadership commitment, and it's critical to building a culture of safety. And almost every lesson that you've heard from me and from our speakers over this last course, you've learned about leadership, and I've referenced you and me many times. Why? Because leadership is at the core of the culture of an organization. And who is at leadership? You and me. Who establishes that culture? Again, you and me. Without us saying that it's safe to speak up, living, walking, talking, and breathing transparency, eliminating hierarchical barriers, allowing the best voices, the loudest voices from the front lines to speak up, seeing our caregivers as business owners. It is only in that way that we share that to us as leaders, we value safety, transparency in our culture. We have also learned from the literature that teamwork training and structured communication improves collaboration. We spoke heavily around SBAR, around safety huddles, around speak up moments, trainings, where we're able to empower and teach our caregivers to speak up, the value of it, the value not only for patient safety, but also for employee wellness, for our employee culture around safety, and our employee culture around mitigating risk. We talked about rewarding team members, recognizing team members for bringing up great ideas that mitigate risk and that increase collaboration, communication, and safety quotient for most of our caregivers. Continuous measurement and feedback fosters accountability and transparency. It is important, and we've learned this through the literature and through some of my speakers, that sharing the data with our caregivers, seeing them and valuing them. Again, so if we're monitoring patient safety, then we might want to report and share the patient safety and risk reporting that's happening in our unit. If we monitor and highly value eliminating falls in our unit or eliminating wound care in our unit, then we might want to report out and share some of those data points with all of our caregivers. If we value work-life balance, we might want to share that with our caregivers. If we value safety reporting, maybe we share with our caregivers through huddles, through leadership meetings. We share with them all of the reports that have come up to encourage others to do the same. We've learned a lot of these points from our lessons and from the reading that we've seen. Effective communications and systems. You'll learn a little bit more through our highly reliable organization, which is a tool or a mechanism that we've employed here at our organization, similar to what's employed in the car business and airlines. We haven't heard of many airlines falling from the sky recently, and that's primarily because they utilize the highly reliable organization model to ensure that they are providing safe and great and effective transportation in the skies. Similar to healthcare, right? We utilize different effective communication tools. We talked briefly earlier about the SBAR, checkbacks and readbacks, where we follow back up with our team, where we analyze the situation and circle back with them to understand what occurred through case reviews, how we were able to fix it, if there were opportunities, and what risk it may have mitigated. We employ and we utilize structured team briefings, huddles, and debriefs. So you learned earlier in lesson 2 from Monica that we typically tend to do and value our case reviews. So we do a case review after any big incident that may have occurred, not to necessarily hold people accountable, but to listen to them, to implement new ideas, and to mitigate risk in the future, to learn from our opportunities. All of those are valuable tools. We also information share across disciplines and shifts. So we have change of shift huddles that we have. You'll learn later from Michelin that in our organization, we have different huddles all throughout the day. They're all structured around safety and leadership culture, where we discuss patients, where we discuss the volume for the day and any opportunities that we may have identified throughout the week or throughout the day, so that we're able to share ideas, opportunities, and risk points so that we're all aware of them and we all take the proper steps to mitigate them in the future. And then transparency and data sharing builds system-wide trust. Again, we need to see each other as business owners and business partners. And so if we value the finance, we share the finance with our team members. If we value culture, we share our culture indicators with our team. If you value falls, you share falls data with our team. All of those things are extremely important to share with those who you want to speak up as you're going through this journey. What is our role? Leadership's role in systems and communication. Modeling transparency and openness at every level. Again, you and I doing a good job at rounding at being seen, at speaking up, at allowing others to speak up at every level, promoting psychological safety, that enables speaking up. We learned about that in all of our lessons, that we must ensure that people feel safe, that they do not fear retribution, that they do not fear any hierarchical challenges from their manager, from ourselves, from people above them. We must provide some level of protection so that our team members and caregivers feel safe to speak up and to share relevant practices and opportunities within the provision of care. It eliminates risk and eliminates harm or avoids harm from our patients and their loved ones. Closing the loop. So we must ensure actions that are followed up on, and we communicate those. It's not just important to make sure that we got those gloves that they said that they needed. We've got to come back and say, hey, we heard that you said you needed gloves. Here are the gloves that you need. Here's why we didn't have them available. And this is the process for ensuring that we always have them available going forward. Closing the loop is important and valuable to ensure that our caregivers feel that we're doing something with what they're saying. If they share trials, tribulations, and opportunities, and we do nothing with it, then there's no point at providing that forum. So it's incumbent upon us to create a culture where people speak up by actually resolving their problems and closing the loop with them. And if we can't do something that they need, that's perfectly fine. But we should also communicate the why we can't do something that they need. Maybe it's financially not possible. Maybe we can't procure or purchase what they need because of some reason. Maybe the benefits are not there and maybe do not outweigh the risks, etc. There should also be in leadership a balance of accountability with just culture, right? So we've learned throughout our lessons that, and especially in this section, that oftentimes when there are opportunities, it's not necessarily the people, it may be the systems that were broken as to why they were not able to provide safe, efficient, or best practice care. So when we do learn of those opportunities, it's important that we balance just culture and accountability. What exactly does that mean? We learned a bit earlier in lesson 1 around just culture and the premise that sometimes the provision of safe care is not possible because there was some other extenuating circumstance which did not allow us to provide the safe care that we maybe wanted to provide. So we must follow the just culture algorithm, which means if it was borderline impossible, or if we did not provide the opportunity to provide safe care, we need to fix that rather than fixing the employee. Now, if the employee and the caregiver did something reckless, they had the right tools, conditions, policies, procedures, supplies, equipment, if everything was perfect for them to provide safe care or reduce and eliminate harm, and they didn't, and they were reckless and negligent, then we must hold them accountable. And we must ensure that they understand why. Not in a punitive way, but in a way that ensures that it doesn't happen again to any other patient. Because at the core of all of what we do, and at the end of what we do is a life, is a patient. So we must ensure that above all else, we provide safe patient care. Here's a case or an example that we can discuss, and we'll discuss another one later, but we can discuss this one. So there's a scenario. A handoff error occurs due to incomplete information. Patient safety compromised by communication breakdown. How can systems thinking and transparent communication prevent recourses? So let's say that you are in an OR and we, before we start the case, we're sharing the details of that patient. And maybe we forget to share that the patient had low blood pressure before we started the case. Incomplete sharing of information may cause some sort of difference in care or breakdown in care, or may cause us to forget to give a medication or forget to administer, or wait to do the procedure. I'd like to ask you to take a moment to think through what this potentially could cause in the OR, what potential harm it could cause for the patient, and how can systems thinking and transparent communication prevent reoccurrence? Well, in thinking through that situation, it is possible that if we've created an environment for people in the OR to feel safe, that at some point during the surgery, if we see the blood pressure dropping, that maybe any nurse or any tech can say, stop, I see that the patient's blood pressure is dropping, something may be wrong. By allowing anybody in the OR to stop the case, generally when a surgeon is the one that's in charge, is creating a safe environment. That caregiver only feels comfortable to say stop because we created a safe environment system-wide, hospital-wide for them to do so. So by that patient, by that individual speaking up, we've essentially allowed for us to provide safe patient care and possibly stopped harm from occurring to that patient, all because there may have been incomplete handoff during a case. I'll invite you to consider another case. Maybe, during the provision of care as a nurse, and you're handing off from one nurse, you're changing shifts, and you're handing off from one nurse to the other, you forget to share that that patient was in a lot of pain. So if you forget to share that, by the time that the new nurse starts and they get around to seeing that patient, maybe it's an hour later, that patient is in excruciating pain because we prevented, or that nurse forgot to share that that patient was in pain the shift prior. So how does systems thinking avoid that going forward? We do safety huddles at the 7 a.m. shift and the 7 p.m. shift. So before each change of shift, before you change your shift with your nurse, you do a unit-wide huddle. So every nurse is able to share how their patient is doing, what the opportunities are, and then we get to the patient with that nurse, with the patient and the nurse in front of us, and we do a handoff. So if I forget as a nurse to say that my patient was in pain, it is an opportunity for that patient to say, hey nurse, remember I was in pain. So you're able to catch that. By creating systems thinking and transparent communication, it had prevented that patient from being in pain going forward. Here are some discussion questions I'd like you to invite you to think through over the next couple of minutes. How does systems thinking change the way we approach communication failures? What structures can leaders put in place to encourage transparency? How do standardized tools support system-wide safety? And what role do students and early career professionals play in shaping culture? I'll give you a few minutes to think through those. So hopefully you were able to think through some of those, and I'll help work through them with you now. How does systems thinking change the way we approach communications failures? So we're able to debrief lots of opportunities in our morning huddles and our afternoon huddles. We're able to talk through what are some of the opportunities. That helps us eliminate communications failures at every level. So we don't just debrief once in the morning or maybe with the nurse, we debrief at multiple times throughout the day to ensure that we're able to catch any issues that we might be having with our patient, in our unit, or around safety. What structures can leaders put in place to encourage transparency? So again, having meetings on a general basis, rounding with your caregivers on the front line, having a safety and risk officer round on your units or integrated as part of your unit care, having system-wide huddles, department-wide huddles, huddles between caregivers, and huddles between caregivers and patients encourages transparency. Having root cause analysis encourage transparency. How can standardized tools support system-wide safety? So we discussed a bit about SBARs. We talked mainly on this or in some of these sessions around communication as it relates to our case reviews, where we're able to speak clearly and transparently as a team around opportunities with safety and risk, where everybody is at the same level and can share opportunities or ideas that they may have found in the provision of care to provide safer care. So lots of strategies that we can employ in our own units or system-wide around this. What role do students and early career professionals play in shaping culture? Students and early career professionals play a great role in shaping culture. They are a big part of the newer workforce and environment coming in. They have fresh ideas. They are looking at the provision of care from a different lens. They've never been in this environment, so it's oftentimes easier for them to share the opportunities. And in so doing, they allow other people to share ideas as well. I think that having new young blood, whether it's students or early career professionals in the environment, is critical to allowing us to ask questions and seeing ourselves from a different light. Oftentimes, people that have been in the workplace for 10, 15, 20 years can think, well, we've always done this way. Why is it going to change? Newer students or early careerists come in oftentimes asking why not, looking at things from a different perspective or lens. It's healthy, and we should always encourage and allow these new individuals or new team members to contribute or to pitch in or be involved so that we're able to hear from them. What's our call to action for this lesson from all of you? Systems thinking and effective communication are inseparable in safety culture. Transparency allows identification and resolution of systematic risks. Leaders, you and me, must champion openness, collaboration, and continuous learning. And every voice matters in building safer systems. I hope you've been able to learn from this lesson, the last and final lesson, lesson 4. I'd like to leave you with a closing message. Patient safety is strengthened when systems thinking and effective communication align. Leaders and future professionals must foster transparency, ensure accountability, and embrace continuous learning across the healthcare system. It's only in us doing that in our own division and scaling that upwards and elsewhere that we're able to truly eradicate unsafe behaviors and encourage, foster, and promulgate safe, transparent, high-level quality care with little to no risk. I encourage all of you to continue in your endeavors to look at healthcare from a fresh perspective and to challenge yourself to be the leader you want to see in each and every one of your caregivers. Helping us understand a little bit more around lesson 4 is our guest speaker, Ms. Shalonda Ridorti.